2017, you had a fantastic year, doing 15 races in total, 6 of which you came first in, and 3 of which were marathons, which you'd obviously not done for a number of years. So tell us about the year 2017.
Yeah, so I think late 2016, I thought, well, let's have a go at a marathon, and I chose the Manchester Marathon. So the first part of the year was, everything was building up to early April, which is when the Manchester Marathon was to take place, and there was a chance of representing England in the veteran 35 category, and to be selected you had to do a reasonable time, but I think finish in the first 3 of people who had signed up, who'd expressed an interest in representing England. And I thought, I might have an outside shot at it, but I haven't done a marathon for many. I've only ever done one marathon, and that was probably about 2007. And I think I did it in 2 hours 53 from memory. And for me, I thought I had to do something probably around about the 2 hours 33, 2 hours 35 mark, and I thought, well, that's going to be a big ask.
I mean, you started the year off coming first in the Captain Cook's Fell race, which was a pretty epic race. I remember seeing you basically sprinting to the finish.
Yeah, I mean, as a race itself, it's pretty meaningless. It's not a major race on anybody's calendar, but I have to say it was one of the most memorable races I think I've had to date. I remember at this point I still wasn't really winning many races to speak of, and this one I actually remember because as I was registering for the race, some other people around were around last year's winner who was handing the trophy back, and they were joking with him because he was so good. Like there was no point in him handing it back because he would just get it again. Unfortunately for him, I had something to say about that, and going up the hill, up the mountain, I was just about leading, but my talent going up the hill is not replicated coming back down, and I lost all of my lead and then some. I managed just about to hang on, and then it came to coming out of the clearing, and I was still just behind him, and I managed to out-sprint him and beat him probably by about 10 metres after half an hour of racing, which is virtually unheard of in a fell race.
So then after that race, you did the Warwickshire cross-country championships in January, then the Brass Monkey 10k at the Rockingham Speedway, and the Milton Keynes half marathon in March, where you came second. But all this time you were training and doing these races in readiness for the Greater Manchester Marathon in April.
Well, what a race. So everything had been building up for this day. Got to the start line, and I was probably about 50 people back. I was nowhere near the front, and I think the plan was to try and run around about 2 hours 33. That was kind of what my training times were sort of indicating. Maybe a touch quicker. I'm not can't entirely remember, and set off, and I stuck to my pace pretty much to the letter, and I think I went halfway a little bit faster than I'd originally intended. I think I was on for roughly about 2 hours 30, and I was thinking, wow, I'm having a cracking race here. And I probably about halfway, I was probably in the mid-teens position-wise. And then I don't know what really happened. I just got faster and faster. And in fact, I then started overtaking considerable numbers of people until really there was no one left to overtake. I think I'd got myself in about 8th position, and there was no one really in sight ahead of me at this point. But actually then with a couple of kilometres left to finish, I then reeled in one more person, and I ended up finishing in 2 hours 27 and 59 seconds. And I was absolutely amazed of how fast I'd gone. I mean, it exceeded my wildest expectations. And this is the point where I just thought, wow, actually, and perhaps I'm a little bit better than what I thought, because I mean, it's not a bad debut to a marathon when I'd only started running less than 2 years previously.
I remember seeing you on the screens in one of the parks in Manchester, and sitting next to this lady and sort of screaming with tears coming down my face, going, "That's my husband! You know, he looks like he's in the top 10." And she was going, "Oh my God, that's amazing! He's doing so well!" And I just couldn't believe it when you came across the line in the top 10. When obviously before the race you'd been saying, "Oh, it definitely won't be quicker than 2.5 hours," and you smashed that.
Well, I mean, to be honest, 2 hours 32, 2 hours 33 was almost really the A game result. That's what I was expecting. I mean, I wasn't even entirely sure I could break 2 hours 40. So to actually then just come just under 2 hours 28 was amazing. I mean, to this day, Manchester is probably still the best executed race I've had. I did a significant negative split, and again from memory, I think my fastest kilometre in the whole race was about the 40 or 41st kilometre, which is crazy to think of. So it showed I finished really, really strongly.
So that obviously led on to greater things during the course of the year.
Yeah, so everything now was really leading up to the build-up for October, which was when I had been selected for England in the V35 category, and the match was at the Chester Marathon in October. So really at this point then it was a case of getting the build-up right for Chester. So I did the Birmingham 10K, mainly just it was on the back of my doorstep, and I'd been given an elite entry for the first time ever on the back of Manchester. So instead of having a number on the front of my vest, I had just my surname. So it was that was excitement in itself back then. Although I didn't have a particularly great race, but it was the experience.
September, you did the Great Bristol Half, which was your best position in a half marathon to date.
Yeah, it was, and I got a new PB at Bristol, so things were looking pretty good at that point. I think actually my time of 69:31, whilst it was a PB, overall I came away a little bit disappointed time-wise. Position-wise, I was over the moon. I'd come second in one of the great series of half marathons, of which Bristol's one of them. So I got the experience going on the stage to collect my special medal, but the time itself was actually a little bit on the disappointing side.
The Simply Health Great Bristol Half Marathon men's race. Again, the presentation being made by Richard Bonner, the UK Cities Executive for Arcadius, and in third place with a time of 1 hour, 9 minutes and 49 seconds from the Marshalls Milton Keynes Club, it's Stephen Tuttle. In second place, in a time of 1 hour, 9 minutes and 31 seconds from the Mercia Fell Runners Club, Lloyd, Biddell. And the winner and champion for 2017, equaling his lifetime best with a time of 1 hour, 8 minutes and 7 seconds from the Bideford Amateur AC Club, it's Aaron Richmond. Ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge your men's 1, 2, 3 in the 2017 Simply Health Great Bristol Half Marathon. So a big thank you to Richard, a big thank you to all of our partners. Please again, thank you very much to all of our medalists there from the men's and women's races.
8th of October, quite a bit of excitement for us both when you obviously put on your England vest and did the MBNA Chester Marathon.
Yeah, so what was I expecting for the race? Perhaps 2:25, 2:24 maybe. But you always look at last year's results and you always name check those who potentially could be contenders. And I looked at the names on the list, saw the previous year's times, and I thought, if I had my A game with me, maybe like a 4th position, I felt more likely to sort of be around about 6th, 7th, 8th, something along those lines. But yeah, we set off and I was in the mix in the leading group. But then, as I sort of expected, a few people zoomed off into the distance. But actually, I also started to feel pretty sluggish in that first quarter of the race. Nonetheless, I think I was joint 4th after about a quarter of the way. And then eventually dropped the other person I was with. And I think at one point I was 3rd, but the leading 2 were just miles ahead of me. I could barely see them, in fact. So, I was thinking I was having a pretty cracking race anyway. But then in the second half, I just had a second wind. I don't know what it was, but then I just started to really put on the afterburners. And then I suddenly realised I was catching second. And then the guy in the lead was starting to come back into view. And it was like, wow, this just wasn't part of the plan. I mean, never thought this could be possible. And it was like, what do I do? Do I take a breather with these people, and then perhaps push on later on? Or what? I didn't really know what to do. But I thought, well, I'll just continue, for as long as I feel good, I'll just continue as I did. So I just zoomed past the guy who was in second. And then about a kilometre later, I did the same with the guy who was leading, and I was now leading the race. I was like, wow. And I was also thinking, I knew the result, the live results or the live times, as we progressed through the course, occasionally got sent back to the start. And I was wondering, does Amy and my mum, who'd come up to see me as well, were they even aware of what was going on? That was quite high in my thoughts. But after about 32k in there, so 10k left, it was a case of all that excess energy had gone, and now it was a case of hanging on. But thankfully, I'd built up quite a substantive lead by this point, which from memory was at least a couple of minutes, 90 seconds, couple of minutes. And although my pace started to drop back a bit, it was not dropping back to the extent of anybody else behind me being able to catch me up with enough distance left. So it was a case really then of just hanging on, and boy, did I have to hang on in those last few K. But, I was never going to let that lead go.
Well, it didn't show that you were exhausted when you crossed the line, as clearly the adrenaline and the noise from the crowds had kicked in.
Yeah, it was kind of strange because, again, I'd never really thought about winning. I'd never won a big race like that. So even it was as I was coming into the home straight, I was thinking, I've got to raise my hands, haven't I, as I crossed the line.
And go through the ribbon.
And go through the ribbon. It was all, something I'd never experienced before, and waving to the crowd as I was getting cheered on. It was all a bit surreal, really. So the goal for going into the race was really just being part of the race and putting on the vest, let alone being the first V35 in that category for the England match against the Celtic nations, let alone being the first V35 in total, and then let alone winning the whole race outright.
And our winner of the MBNA Chester Marathon 2017 in a time of 2 hours 26 minutes 12 seconds, Lloyd Biddell!
So, by this time, obviously, your obsession with running had started to slightly take over our lives. And our holiday in New Zealand, you decided to enter the Auckland Marathon. Only, what, 19 days after the Chester Marathon, as you do.
Which is just crazy to do another marathon 19 days after you've just put your all in the previous marathon. And at the end of a holiday, of which we'd done a huge amount of walking. I mean, the time was never going to be that fast. But, you know, it was irresistible to do.
You say the time wasn't that fast, but you still did Auckland in 2 hours 31:11.
Yeah, and that's the closest I've ever had to actually hitting the wall as a race. I mean, it was a bit crazy on all fronts because I think the start of the race was it 6 a.m. or something crazy like that. So you had to then catch a ferry to get to the start, which was part of the pre-race brief because it was a point-to-point course. So I think I remember having breakfast at something like 3 a.m. and leaving the hotel to get to the ferry point whilst people were still out clubbing. It was all a bit bizarre. And after about 10k, the wheels started to pretty much come off, and it's the closest I've ever had to hitting the wall. I remember going through halfway, saying to Amy as I think I saw you, and I felt absolutely terrible. And I just thought, well, for as long as I'm in a prize position, which I think was down to about 6th, something like that, I'll keep chugging along, and then I'll just drop off and jog in, which didn't really work out that way because then suddenly one guy in front of me decided he wanted to walk. So then all of a sudden I think eventually I got into about 4th place, but the leaders by this point had left me considerably, and I just stayed 4th the rest of the way. But it did give me some extra confidence actually, because I felt like the wall was hitting, but it never truly hit. I think I was going from like 3 minutes 20, a kilometre 3 minutes 30-ish, eventually running about 3:40s, which by any account that's not hitting the wall, that's just slowing down a bit. So it just showed that even though I didn't have my A game with me, I could still dig deep and continue chugging along. The diesel engine was still there.
So epic year, which you finished off with a rare relay race with Mercia Fell runners, and then obviously winning the Petzl Night Runner and the Wheaton Aston 10k, again both in December.
I think the only thing to mention about the Petzl Night Runner was that was in heavy snow, and both on the ground and in the air, and you could barely see where you were going. The vision was absolutely appalling, but it was quite interesting to run in when you could only see about 10 metres ahead of you and not see where you were running. And again, the Wheaton Aston 10k rounded off the year.